All right, so we got a match between Tribal Warrior and the General. The Tribal Warrior is around the same age as a Illuminati, maybe a little bit newer, just slightly. Well known for its skirmisher rush strategy, which should be pretty good against the General, which will likely go for crossbows. But yeah, Estes, definitely a prolific scripture, has about half dozen different AIs that you can see in tournaments. I think Tribal Warrior was his first AI, but it's also still one of the strongest ones. And I mean, well, the General is my AI. I could say a lot about it, but maybe I'll just have a chance to comment on it throughout the game. Currently, the General is the only undefeated AI in this tournament. I don't know if that will last, but we'll have to see. The Tribal Warrior could be the first one to deliver the General a loss. So I think the General is probably most known for going for fast castle strategies. And with the Britons, I think we should see that. For this tournament, I did add some hit and run micro, so we might see that in this game. Maybe not. It depends. It only uses that hit and run micro when attacking rather than defending. And so since the General will probably be on the defensive, just looking at the positions, it does have this forest in the back, but kind of built its lumber camp, and it's in a spot that's close to the TC, but it's kind of at the edge of the forest. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But the forage bushes and then gold are in the back, and the General's building a mill for the chickens. And the stone is pretty far forward, about as far forward as it can be actually. But it's stone, so it might not be a huge concern. The Tribal is probably not going to be the defending AI, at least early on in the game. But it does have the main gold forward, which could be a downside, and just one forest that's in the back. But forage bushes are pretty well defended. So far the AIs are pretty even. I've seen a second lumber camp from the General, which actually hits the same forest but on a different side of it, which is kind of nice. But unfortunately, the General, it found a neutral deer here, but trapped the deer inside the forest, and it's probably going to get stuck there until the General researches feudal age, because I don't have any workarounds for if this happens, so that's really unfortunate. Getting these deer in could have been a lot of food, but too bad. Meanwhile, it looks like Tribal has ignored the chickens and is going for a pretty far lumber camp, unfortunately. Would have been better to build it right here, but building on the other side of this further away forest. And Tribal might have, looks like Tribal's going to steal this goose that the General didn't find. I don't know if relics will feature much in this game, but it looks like there's two different relics that are fairly close to the General's base. Alright, so General's got some chickens being gathered. And Tribal's halfway to feudal age right now. We're building the barracks. The barracks might be a couple seconds late, get finished after the feudal age is complete. We'll see if that's true or not. Yeah, especially with the melee, the fast advancing, that barracks is going to delay some of the feudal buildings. Alright, we'll see if it's followed up with an archery range. Yes, it is. And we also got an outpost being built. And, oh, looks like the Tribal is going to be going for a forward tower, but he keeps on getting canceled. So, let's see, that tower's still getting placed. I wonder why it keeps on canceling it. But it doesn't look like villagers are being assigned to it, unfortunately. So, hopefully that's not a bug. Yeah, just double check the game. It's not just a capture age display kind of bug. But meanwhile, we see a few skirmishers being trained by Tribal, and no upgrades yet, but that's okay. Maybe we'll see fletching being researched on the way. Meanwhile, the general's up to feudal age and is making its feudal age buildings. We've got a tower to protect the gold. The tower, unfortunately, is not by the wood. It's possible that the gold is probably more important to protect, since that'll be really important for the archers. And you got this second lumber camp here, which the villagers can go to if needed. But there is still this easy route to go to the left of the general's base. But skirmishers are here, and this tower is hitting them. They're not running away, and that could be smart. The skirmishers have a good amount of pierce armor. One skirmisher down. Alright, so the general is making some archers, which unfortunately is not the play. If those get ungarrisoned from the archer range, they're going to get killed pretty quickly. But besides idling the economy, these skirmishers aren't doing a whole lot. We just see a villager coming forward from Tribal, I think trying to build this tower. But it keeps on getting cancelled. So, a lot of idle economy from the general. I think mostly due to these villagers being garrisoned. It looks like the general did release the archers. So, unfortunately, we'll have some kills. Got a jaguar killing off the tower villager. And some more keep on getting sent. But the tower foundation keeps on getting cancelled. And unfortunately, the general's still wasting archers on the skirmishers, and we got some forward villagers trying to knock down this tower by Tribal. And most of them left, but we still got two villagers trying to knock it down. Alright, that hero archer is sending those villagers away. Happy to see that. Probably the best use of resources that archer could have had. But skirmishers still continuing to come in from Tribal space. We got a stone mining camp, and this mining camp was kind of denied, but we have this safe gold over here for the general. The general has crossbow researched. But even crossbows aren't going to be very cost effective against these skirmishers. But the skirmishers don't have the first armor upgrade yet. So, especially once like Bodkin comes in, these crossbows could start doing a fair amount of damage. The scout from Tribal goes down. this lumber camp might be denied or become like... I'm hoping that this doesn't become a lumber camp where the general just sends a whole bunch of villagers that which then get shot down by the skirmishers. Yeah, so you can see here the advantage of being able to focus fire with the skirmishers. They can kill those crossbows in one hit. Alright, and the tribal's got the first armor upgrade for the skirmishers, which is important. The general is ahead in score, but that could just be through like a pretty good KD. The resources have been resources gathered are a lot lower than tribal. The general has a slight villager lead. It does have a second TC built here in the back. But now that tribal's not attacking in this part of the town, we're seeing the tribal being able to cause a bit more damage here. And I think the general really needs to get like the second, like it needs to get Bodkin for these crossbows before they can actually do some damage against these skirmishers. Or ideally just switch off of crossbows and go to a different unit, but unfortunately all that the general will do is maybe mix in skirmishers. So we got the tribal going to Castle Age, but like the general doesn't have any strategy to any code to switch off of its main strategy until Imperial Age. There was a scout that was being trained. I didn't know if, or like a scout that was attacking. I think that was just the starting scout because there's no stable. But third TC being built right now by the general, and also got a market. The KD gap is becoming more even. And tribals in Castle Age. Elite skirmishers being researched. Let's take a look back at Tribal's base. Still 1 TC. Doesn't have the wood for a second TC. Alright, we got a siege workshop from the general. We'll see if maybe the general will start making mangonels. I'm not sure how much the general will prioritize making mangonels, unfortunately. I think it might still prioritize making crossbows. And unfortunately, I think this tower will be the only one that the general will make. It doesn't really have code for additional towers to defend the town. And so Tribal is taking the score lead as well as the KD lead. So it looks like the general's starting to make skirmishers, but they're not going to do very well against the elite skirmishers. And Tribal's also ahead on villagers at this point. Alright, we got a castle here with a lot of villagers being placed on it. being built in a spot, it'll probably go up. Unfortunately, it doesn't really protect a lot of the economy, and so these skirmishers will still be able to do a lot of damage. But at the very least, it'll probably keep these skirmishers from being able to go to this part of the general space unless it goes a long way around. Alright, these skirmishers need to get out of the way. Stop attacking all of the units nearby. Alright, so they are getting away from the castle. Yeah, it looks like the game engine hasn't really detected that this gold mine is not safe to send villagers to anymore. I'm kind of hoping that the game engine will decide to start sending the villagers to this gold mine instead. Yeah, the general still only has the +1 attack and no other upgrades on the ranged units. The tribal has light cav, ahead by about 20 villagers. Now we've got some rams being trained to take out that castle. So this castle helped, but I think it's at this point it's too late for the general. We'll make sure that the tribal can maintain the follow through, but this should be tribal's game to win. Got a few villagers that ejected to attack the ram. It kind of looked like there was code to like eject the villagers to attack the rams, but I think that was just the ungarrison done by the game engine, and then the code to get the villagers to attack rams kicked in. The ungarrison, I'm pretty sure, wasn't scripted, but the rams are fleeing from the castle for some reason. Looks like the whole attack might be called off, at least for the melee units. The skirmishers still managing to kill off pretty much all of the general's units that go around there. They can just camp here and just kill units all day because the general doesn't have any intelligence on where it tells its villagers to go gather resources. I haven't really had added code to tell it particular gathering sites are dangerous and off limits. Alright, so the castle went down. I think once this TC goes down, I'll call GG. I got a castle in general's face here. I think this is that's the GG call then. That's like taunting 105. Alright, GG. So the general has his first loss. So the general was doing pretty well while the skirmishers were camping underneath the tower that kept on killing off a lot of the skirmishers, but once those skirmishers eventually started attacking another part of the general space that was undefended, there wasn't much that the general could really do. but we'll see what happens on Arena. Yeah, I think Tribal has 2 different civs for Arena. Let me double check. Yeah, so Cumans are Slavs. Let's head back to the randomizer. Alright, so we got Cumans for a Tribal. And the General plays Burgundians on Arena. Alright, let's go for game 2. Alright, so we do have a chicken arena, this time with Arctic hares. Aha. I think that's Tribal's language for the chicken maps. Alright, so the General's got the lumber camp placed. Also got back gold and back forage. And hasn't found these cows yet. Or these cows. So, not very good exploring from the start by the General. But at the very least, has had animals to keep on gathering from. Meanwhile, Tribal's bringing in the second boar. Alright, chicken mill for the General, and still hasn't found 4 of the cows. And the final cow is brought in. We'll see if the General can find the cow before this one is completely gathered. And I'm also curious, the General isn't gathering this boar yet. Let's see. Has it seen this boar? I don't think it has seen its second boar, so that's a pretty bad start for the General. Will these villagers find it? I don't think so. Come on, Scout, go this way, go this way. That's kind of annoying. Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's past the point where it does the home exploration. I think it generally does it for 5 minutes. It's kind of strange. It seems to be going out to the middle and then coming back. There shouldn't be any DC going on for Arena for scouting, from what I remember. But General is responding by adding some farms. Yeah, Tribal's adding some farms as well. So, it looks like the General did eventually find the boar. And it's not gathering it with any villagers. So I think so this chicken hunters will go back to it, but also losing out a bit of the food on the boar is is rough. So we got a second lumber camp, and this one is unfortunately very close to the gate. Would have been a lot better if it was right here. I'm not sure why it was placed here, honestly. This would have been placed with DUC, but I think let me just take a look at the... I wonder if it just actually hasn't even explored these trees yet. So just, so yeah, the start from the general has not been going very well, just due to bad scouting. A little bit more resources collected for tribal. A smoother start overall. So we got the second mill for the general. Yeah, we got the mining camp. And the general is supposed to start researching feudal age. Tribal has a few seconds of idle TC time, but nothing major. So it looks like the tribal is going for a little bit slower build. Researching one villager later. Shouldn't be too much of a difference. At one villager difference, it's really just more strategic than anything. So we got the mining camp being placed by tribal. And thankfully we've got trees on this side of the gate as well, so the general's probably not going to chop through this anytime soon. Alright, looks like tribal's exploring the general right here. Alright, so we got the feudal building started from the general, stable, blacksmith. And we'll see tribal follow up here shortly with an archer range and a blacksmith. So I'm curious to see what... Oh, trying to push in the fox. So it looks like General's deer pushing did kind of kick in, but this gate is not... There isn't any code to open up the gate. So that's unfortunate. I'm also kind of curious why the General's deer pushing at this point of in the game. It shouldn't have any deer pushing code being used after feudal age. It's also possible maybe the scout is trying to go inside and this fox is blocking it, but I'm guessing this was a deer pushing code. So maybe I'll have to investigate that to see why it might be firing again. And because of that, the general hasn't found tribal. Alright, both AIs are researching Castle Age. The general is one villager faster. And tribal seems to be going for ranged units. It's got archers, which will become crossbows here pretty soon, I think. And also add in a siege workshop. They might see some capped rams here soon. Alright, so got some scouts here from the general. +1 armor and loom. Got second TC being placed. And a monastery. Alright, light cav coming in for the general. But these light cav are being kept at home for some reason. Alright, that light cav is still trying to push in the fox and the gate is still closed. Alright, killed the scout. And converted an archer. And so what I'm curious about is, I don't think the general's been able to find any relics either. Which is why it's, I think that's why his light cav micro for arena hasn't been kicking in. So at this point, the general is just relying on the boom. Alright, so looks like the... Okay, so looks like the light cav micro is starting to kick in. You can see the light cav going toward each of the relics. And we got this scout finally looking around. We should be able to find tribal eventually. We got a... looks like a forward villager. Got a... The general is dangerously close to having chopped through here. Alright, let's see. Will this monk get detected? I don't think so. But I think these light cav might go down here. And so does the monk. The general's adding an archer range, maybe adding in some skirmishers. And looks like the general's switching to knights here. And one relic might be all the general's able to get. I don't know actually if the general will like continue with all of the monks that it's trained or not. This guy's trying to capture a relic, but these crossbows seem to be focused on that gate instead. Okay, the monk went down. And the rams seem to be trying to find a place to just be able to walk inside. Alright, so these knights have +1 armor. They might be too few to really cause a lot of damage against the crossbows here. And the retreating code from the knights are in. And looks like Trouble doesn't have code to pick up the wild animals, unfortunately. And I don't think these skirmishers have any upgrades. Yeah. Alright, knight is killed, but a new knight is coming out. So, at this point, it's a matter of whether the general can hold on and maintain his boom, or a tribal is able to break through these walls. Because it seems like whatever code the tribal is using for the rams is not working. I don't know if it's an issue of using like the default code for ram control. I think that usually works a lot better with wall targeting mode, or whatever the SN is called, being turned on. And maybe that's turned off right now. So let's see, the general's villager lead is continuing to increase. We also got a defensive castle here, but the general is throwing a lot of units away. We got fletching, which will slightly help with the skirmishers by just continuing to add units which just die immediately to the spears and crossbows. The general's adding a market. I think this will go up. It could... I don't think this villager will get targeted by the crossbows. Alright, so the general's adding in a Custier, which still get killed off pretty easily, but the charge attack might help at least killing units instead of just like dying immediately. And I think these villagers might be just out of range of the crossbows. Let's see. Yeah, General still continuing to throw units away, but maintaining a 30 villager lead over Tribal. Just a matter of whether the general can mass up enough armies to be able to drive off Tribal here. The general has a fair number of stone miners, so it could get enough stone for a second castle. If that's placed well, that could drive Tribal off here. Just looking to see where the rams are. Yeah, for some reason, the general seems to be building farms way out here. I guess there's not enough space inside the town to build farms. This might be outside of the town size, which is really unfortunate. And so this could really cause some damage by the general keeping on sending villagers outside the gate. It looks like a ram did squeeze through while the gate was open. And so Tribal's continuing to increase the military size while the general can't keep military units coming. So we got cavalry are being researched, which of course the Burgundians can do in Castle Age. But we should have Imperial Age starting any moment here. Alright, so the Rams are attacking the walls. I don't think they'll break through. I think the castle will kill the Ram before it breaks through the walls. But it'll be close. Okay, I think this wall will go down because that ram is going to be protecting this villager. And I don't think this castle is going to go up either. Alright, so Tribal is inside. The ram was knocked down, but units will start streaming into the general's base here. Alright, we'll see if the general can eventually find a safe spot for this castle, but it might take a while and a lot of dead villagers. Maybe the spot will work. Nope. Just gotta keep these units all distracted for long enough. But the castle has already lost at least half health here. Villagers trying to defend, but the ram is continuing to do damage here. And the general doesn't have enough resources to build a second castle. Imperial Age on the way for Tribal. While Imperial Age has been reached for the general. Adding forging, finally. Looks like we had a whole bunch of ranged units that died to the castle, so the general might catch a bit of a break here. And General still doesn't have enough resources for the castle. For whatever reason, this stone mine is being preferred over this one. Alright, adding bodkin, conscription. Alright, monk goes down. So, attack is coming in from tribal once again. Alright, this castle's probably not going to go up either, but the general does have a lot more military units this time. But it still is going to have the micro to hold them all together, so they might die pretty quickly. But if this castle can go up, that could be really... that could make the outcome different here. So it looks like the general's defensive units are going to keep the attack at bay for the moment, and I think this castle will go up. Alright, second castle is up. Tribal adding halberdier and the first armor upgrade. So it looks like we're gonna start mixing in halberdiers to go along with the skirms and crossbows. Yeah, meanwhile, the general is actually climbing ahead on military. But once those halberdiers start coming in, if they do, that could swing military numbers back in tribal's favor. So I kind of regret missing it. I think there is one point where a whole bunch of ranged units died to this castle. Maybe that combined with the tribal trying to go up to Imperial kind of stalled the attack, and then the general was slowly able to kind of push the attack back. And unfortunately for tribal, they allowed the general to come back into the game. But tribal's once again pretty far ahead in military. So the general's back in it, but I wouldn't say that the general has the advantage in this game. It's probably roughly even at this point. Unfortunately, I don't think the Cumans get Arbalist, so the tribal is going to need to do some sort of tech switch, I think, if he wants to go into the Cuman's more powerful units, and he might be trying to do that with switching to the Cavalier. So we've seen a bunch of halberdiers on the field, and we'll see if the general can mix in some units to be able to kill those halberdiers off. So we've seen the first big battle in Imperial Age between both AIs. It seems like the general's being able to fend off most of the halberdiers dying against the castle. And all these siege rams will be lost as well. Alright, so momentum's turning toward the general, has a military advantage here. I think the Cuirassiers are... They're still the Castle Age Cuirassiers, not Imperial Age. And not the elite upgrade yet. But the fight is now underneath Tribal's castle, which could really kill off a bunch of the general's units. And the trebuchet is attacking the TC instead of the castle. But Tribal might be losing to several trebuchets here. So that's a lot of resources lost. And the castle goes down. Let's see. Zooming way out to count the TCs. So Tribal has 6 TCs and 5 plus this one going up. But General definitely has the military numbers to be able to push in through here. Yeah, the elite upgrade is in for the General. And Tribal resigns. So this was definitely a back and forth match, or more like Tribal had all of the momentum and then lost it. Let's see if we can figure out some things from the Capture Age timelines. So once the General got to Imperial Age, Tribal lost a bunch of soldiers right here at this point. And the sudden drop, I think I saw that a bunch of them were killed off by a castle. And so Tribal was ahead here economy-wise because of the General's economy being hurt by Tribal's attack. Actually, hold on. No, that's the General ahead just because of the General going for the boom approach. Yeah, but from this point on in the game, the Tribal is actually ahead on economy. Despite the General having the Burgundians. So that probably shows that the General has some ways to go on improving its actual economy focus. And I'll have to look into that. Might not be getting the eco-techs like wheelbarrow and handcart early enough. Taking a look at villager numbers. Okay, forget what I said about... I keep on switching in my mind which color is Susie. Yeah, the General was red, so the General was ahead here, and then Tribal got ahead. Okay, so the General had larger villager numbers here. And then Tribal almost caught up, and then the General got ahead again. So let's take a look at the game stats. Yeah, if those rams had broken through those gates, the General would have had to resign pretty quickly. So I wish I could know exactly what was causing that kind of behavior. It seemed like they were trying to target buildings inside of the General's base.